Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 of this travel story documenting my year living and working in New Zealand. If you didn't see part 1, here's a super quick recap. It ended with me being discharged from hospital. If you want to find out why, I'll link part 1 at the end of the video, and make sure you hit the like and subscribe button for more travel content. So back to it. The end of February saw us take a trip out to Mount Cook. I was feeling human again after a good few weeks of recuperation, and this was always on the must-visit list prior to coming to New Zealand. The drive up from Queenstown was stunning. Up State Highway 8, through the Lindis Valley, and then a scenic approach towards Aoraki, with Lake Pukaki alongside. One of my favourite drives of the whole trip. Plenty of time to stop and take photos. Unfortunately, it was quite quiet. We booked a Stargazing tour, which was one of the highlights of the whole trip. Perfectly calm night with clear skies, extremely low light pollution. It was an amazing experience and I massively recommend it. What I wouldn't recommend is then following that amazing experience by attempting to sleep on an inflatable mattress in a station wagon. Worst sleep I think we've ever had. Character building stuff. We had a nice relaxing morning the following day before heading back off to Queenstown, and things seemed to be looking up. The weather was great, work was going well, but then...
Oh, bugger!
Stay at home. It will break the chain of transmission and it will save lives. Now is not the time to be relaxed or flexible. We do need tough rules to win the battle ahead.
Yeah. What followed was a 48-hour window in which we had to decide whether or not to leave New Zealand. But with extremely limited flight options and the risk of actually catching the virus and then taking it home, we decided to stay. So for the next 5 weeks, New Zealand was plunged into lockdown along with the rest of the world. Pretty scary time. What was stranger was that we ended up having the house we were sharing to ourselves, as the guy we lived with was stuck on the North Island. So all things considered, we were in one of the nicest places on earth with a place of our own. Not so bad, eh? We also got confirmation that as we were contracted workers, that we would get some furlough payments, so that massively helped with rent, etc. We did a lot of walking over the next few weeks, and unlike the rest of the world where cases were getting out of hand, New Zealand did a great job of mitigating them. At the end of the 5 weeks, there was supposedly 0 cases left in the country. How true that was in hindsight, I have no idea. But everything went pretty much back to normal in New Zealand after those 5 weeks, aside from the hardline border controls that were brought in. Anyone wanting to enter the country had to quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks and pay a lot of money to do so. We spent a lot of time enjoying an eerily quiet Queenstown, Arrowtown and Glenorchy, and eventually booked a tour for our #1 must-see place in New Zealand, Milford Sound. We drove to Te Anau and stayed the night. When we woke up the following morning, it had started to snow. So we met up for our tour, which was a minibus, and as there was very few tourists, there was only myself, Meg and one other person on the tour. Our guide could have easily cancelled with the low numbers and bad weather, but massive credit to him, he didn't. He made us aware that we had clearance to proceed halfway up Route 94, where a decision would be made on whether it was safe enough to advance or not, based on the snowfall. Fortunately, we were granted access, and a convoy was formed with other tour buses. We stopped frequently along the way, and the snow just added to the atmosphere. Our tour guide actually said,
I've never seen it, these conditions, because normally when it's like this, it's closed.
Yeah. After a slow drive through, we made it. Our boat was waiting, and the trip did not disappoint at all. The wild weather added to the mood and atmosphere. The waterfalls were really powerful. It was choppy. The sun made an appearance, there were rainbows, and, of course, dolphins. It was an emotional experience. Just before this trip, we'd had a series of bad news come through from back home that was at the forefront of our minds, and to say we needed this life-affirming experience at the time was an understatement. We had about 3 weeks left in Queenstown after that trip, trying to soak up as much as possible before it was time to move on. Work was drying up, and the reduction in tourism and uncertainty of what was to come seemed to mean that people were cutting back. So we figured we'd head to the capital and see what work we could find there. So we planned another scenic route up to the North Island while stopping at a few places we'd wanted to see on the way. First up was Dunedin, which I really enjoyed. I thought as a city it was massively underrated. Beautiful coastline, and the Otago Peninsula is as stunning as anything you'll see in the country. Being half Scottish, I found the history of the city interesting. Dunedin was settled by Scots from 1848, and its name is basically a Gaelic translation of the word Edinburgh. From there we drove up to Tekapo. And the lodge we stayed in was so nice. We got a ridiculously good rate for it as well. With no tourists being allowed in the country, it meant hotel and attraction prices were ultra low. And yeah, the lodge was on a farm with chickens, lambs, ducks, alpacas, and an absolute unit of a pig called Whiskey. Hey Whiskey.
Open?
So there was a lot of fun had there, and you can quite easily just stare at Lake Tekapo. The tone of that blue is captivating, and there's a really nice walk that takes you around the lake and into the Tekapo Regional Park that I recommend. Kaikoura was next up, and unfortunately we couldn't see a damn thing. An absolute wall of fog meant that other than a bit of seal watching and a walk amongst the clouds, yeah, we had to entertain ourselves.
Can't see a darn thing apart from this penguin right here. Oh, right on cue.
So from there it was back to Picton to get our ferry back to Wellington, where we'd attempt to start again. I remember us reflecting whilst back in Picton about just how much had happened in our personal lives but also across the world since we were last there. The ferry over was pure pain. The Cook Strait was so choppy. The seasickness wiped me out. I was just trying to breathe through it. Meg, on the other hand, overheard a woman in the bathroom say that, and I quote, "It was coming out of both ends." But we made it back to Wellington, and more importantly, we were reunited with Pickle.
It's just okay. And then
You okay, Pickle? You okay?
who's this? Who's this?
Go on, Pickle.
There you go.
We found a place to live down in Lyle Bay, and the weather for the most part was actually pretty decent. I managed to get some temp work as a traffic controller, and we spent a lot of time down at the beaches and exploring the city. Work was, however, becoming increasingly difficult to get, as again the majority of businesses were looking to only hire permanent residents, and after just short of 2 months in Wellington, we made the decision to head home to the UK. The pandemic had had a massive impact on our plans. We were initially considering going to Australia for a year straight after New Zealand, and maybe even going to Hawaii, but none of it was doable with all the restrictions in place. Flights back to the UK were also significantly reduced, and there was only 1 or 2 a week at this point flying to London only, with a connection in Singapore. So we booked a flight back, which left us with just short of a month left in New Zealand. This meant that the time had come to sell Gloria, our noble, trusty station wagon.
Look after her. Yo.
No words.
And after some nice work-free weeks in Wellington, we decided to get a flight back up to Auckland to spend our last 2 weeks there before heading back to the UK. There were some really nice views looking down on the North Island on our flight from Wellington to Auckland, and the best moment of the trip was still to come. I'd been wanting to ask Meg to marry me for a while. I already knew she was the one a long time before the trip, but our time together in New Zealand just confirmed it tenfold. She is the best partner I could have ever hoped for, and the thought of a lifetime of adventures with her just makes me smile every time. Throughout the trip, I managed to save enough to buy her an engagement ring, handmade in New Zealand. And I'd planned to ask her once we got to Auckland. Fortunately, she said yes, and our last few days in Auckland were spent celebrating and just enjoyed each other's company. It was about 18 degrees in Auckland too, in winter. That's a UK summer. So the time had come to head back to the UK, where a world of crazy restrictions awaited us. But as it happened, once we landed in Singapore for our connection, our phones both had alerts saying that New Zealand would be going back into lockdown as cases had emerged within the country. Swings and roundabouts, I guess. If you were to predict what could have happened a million times over, I would have never predicted half the things that would have happened in our time in New Zealand. With all that being said, I can't wait to return under better circumstances and visit all the places that we missed and revisit all the many places that are now so special to us both. I'd massively appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. I have more New Zealand and travel content available, and it is my aim for this channel to end up back in New Zealand at some point. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.